Hey podcasters, I just wanted to take this opportunity. This is our promo before our main show. I just want to make sure that you are part of our amazing Facebook community. It is for active creative entrepreneurs and professional business owners from around the globe. It is not one of those spammy, it's all about me type of sales groups. This Facebook group, I actually created it to help build relationships, strong relationships and conversations. But more importantly, you can also plug into some of our special events and get invitations. But it's just a great, great tool. And everyone comes from a place of value, which I absolutely love and endorse. So listen, guys, if you're not already part of our Facebook community, make sure that you go to www.facebook.com. /groups/become a game changer. All right. I'll ask you for a few questions and make sure that you do that right now. Pause this audio. Okay. Go to the Facebook group and introduce yourself, and look forward to seeing you in there. Take care. Bye.
This is the Game Changers Experience. Deep dive conversations with leading business disruptors, Olympic athletes, celebrities, entrepreneurs, and influencers from around the world. This show will teach you insights about the winning principles in mindset, productivity, marketing, branding, entrepreneurship, business strategy, and more. Hosted by Productivity Authority, business strategist, former elite athlete, author, and public speaker, Adam Strong.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Game Changers Experience with myself, Adam Strong. And today I have a special guest on the show. His name is called Nick Nanton. Nick is an Emmy Award-winning film director and producer. He's also worked with a variety of different celebrities, from Sir Richard Branson to will.i.am to Steve Forbes to Jack Nicklaus to Jack Canfield to Brian Tracy. An abundance of many different celebrities. He's also the best-selling, he's also written 24 best-selling books as well. One of them is a Wall Street Journal best-selling book, which is all around story selling, which I'm going to be talking to Nick a little bit about. And, you know, I'm just so fascinated about Nick's CV, but more his career as well. So Nick, just want to say welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
It's awesome to have you. So, it's really interesting because, I'm really fascinated to know how you kind of got into the film industry, and because it's quite it's quite a niche, I suppose, in a way. But I'm really fascinated to know how you got into media and how you ended up working with lots of celebrities and things. Where did this all start for you?
Yeah, so I started writing music as a kid when I was 6. I started songwriting at 6. I started playing it at 6, songwriting at 16. I put out my first record at 18. And so through all that, I was learning the process of creating media. I didn't really even know what that meant at the time, but that's what I was doing. I went to college. I managed some bands. I went to law school because I wanted to be in the music industry. I managed more bands. And what I found myself doing more often than not was helping produce albums, getting distribution deals, creating. I had to create all the album artwork. Sometimes I had to create music videos because none of us had any money. But I actually worked with some bands that were really good. But breaking through in that industry, particularly at the time, was tough. Still tough to break through. I think there's some more tools at our disposal now, but more crowding also. So when I started learning to create media, I would say was I had one particular band that I was working with, and we got them. I talked our way into a distribution deal, which basically meant there's a company that was going to take the CDs, because that's what we had back then, CDs, and was going to put them in record stores all across the country. Well, so a couple of challenges that presented. Number one, they liked the music, so that got us there. We produced a good record. We didn't have enough money for a good photo shoot for the record, so we ended up coming up with a concept for the band that was drawing them like cartoons, and we made it sort of like a parody of the Rice Krispies box. There's a piece band. The genre of music is called Power Pop, so we created an album called Power Pop, so we did the whole thing. And so I had a friend who was broke like the rest of us in college. For like $100, he drew them all. I designed it all like in Photoshop or whatever it was. And so we were able to I realized when we were going to put this album in stores that we would be on shelves with Metallica and Blink-182 and whatever else. And they had unlimited budgets seemingly, and we had no budget. So I had to learn pretty quickly, what can I do to help this stand up next to those albums and those bands people know? That was number one, so you don't get laughed off the shelf. Number two, I learned a big lesson that just because they were there didn't mean anybody knew that. The second part of that was the marketing of it. Now that you've pressed all these CDs, you've got them all in the stores, you actually have to now market to tell the world they should go there and buy the CD. And we were not prepared for that at all. So we basically got a bunch of CDs shipped back to us. But so that's really when I started getting into media creation. I manage a bunch of bands. I give you the short story. My mentor, my business partner now for almost 20 years, he had been in business, quite a while longer than me. He said, "Hey, I see what you're doing with bands. You're really creating their brands. If you would do the same thing for business people, you could actually feed your family and you'd probably be happier." And so I said, well, let's try it. And so we did. And then it ended up with me writing the book with my business partner, How to Do It, called Celebrity Branding You, How to Become a Celebrity in Your Own Industry, taking all the tactics we used with our clients that I'd learned from entertainment, he brought from marketing, and sort of how we combined those. And then I started speaking all across the country and then the world and other things like that. And I just was, we now have helped over 3,600 clients in 67 countries, I believe it is, around the world build their personal brands. And what I found fascinating about working with these people was that they all had their own stories. I mean, it's sort of cliche, but they all had a story. There was always a reason why they ended up coming to me, and they had something they wanted to do. But on the surface, there was 100 financial advisors or 200 personal injury lawyers. And the general public doesn't know how to differentiate. And so as I started digging into working with them, I tell people this. People get very confused by the term brand and branding, and you can spend as much money as you want on branding, and I'm not knocking that, but just to distill it down very simply for people, here's what I say: your brand is nothing more than your story, and branding is simply storytelling. A great brand is a story that the world wants to tell for you. So at the end of the day, the best story wins. So what I was doing is, what I would do with each of these people was, we would dig down with them to try to figure out, what is your story? What makes you uniquely suited to serve your ideal client? And it's all the things that we take for granted because they happen to us. Oh, that's not that big of a deal because it happened to me. If it was a big deal, it happened to someone else. Or that's not that big of a deal. It's really easy. Well, it's not. It's really easy for you because natural talent. It is not easy for other people, right? So we started going down this road, and as I was doing that, I just got interested. I said, I wonder, we started publishing a bunch of books for clients. I created some TV shows. I'd done my fair share of video production, and I was just like, man, I wonder what it'd be like to do a documentary. And so I found a story. I really had found me, but I was open to looking now for a story about a little boy with Down syndrome who played T-ball. And I said, and his mom wrote a story about his first season in T-ball, and it made everyone who I showed cry. And it was just a short little story they were putting in the local paper. So I went to some clients and said, hey, I'm going to try to make this into a short documentary. Would you support me? I'm going to try to win an Emmy. I don't know what that means, but we'll see where that goes. And I had a couple of people say yes. We went on the journey, and we made the film, raised a lot of money for Down syndrome for children. And we had a lot of people promote it. We sort of did like a product launch, but with the short film. And then we got 2 Emmy nominations. I won my first Emmy, and I just decided that was honestly, it was one of the easiest things I'd ever done. And I think it's because of all the other experiences I'd had. It was really a good fit for my experience level at that time, but also for my skill set. And I really just learned how to build a team. And it was the easiest thing I'd ever done because I got a friend who's really good at this. Let me have him do this. And this friend's good. And I was just sort of like the orchestrator. And so I had a vision, and I knew what I wanted, and everyone knew what I wanted. And we all worked together to make it happen. And it was like, man, that was so easy. So my business partner was like, he's like, you did your first film, you had 2 Emmy nominations, and you win one. He's like, I think that means you're supposed to do more. And so I started talking to some of my clients, because at the time we had a personal branding agency. I said, hey, do you want me I'll make a short documentary about your business. At the time, I think we charged like, I don't know, $10,000 or something like that. And, now it's 50 times that. But we got a lot more in depth of what we do too. But I went out and did a couple of those, and they just started going. So, now I've made 65 documentaries, been all around the world, and interesting, precarious situations in some amazing places that people don't get to go. And it's been an amazing journey. So you asked a question, there's the answer.
Wow, that's fantastic. Listen, I know that you're working with Larry King on a really interesting documentary, which I'll ask you a little bit later, actually. But what really, I guess my kind of thought process off the back of what you've just said actually is, what are the, I suppose, similarities have you found between human connection and telling a good story?
So at the end of the day, we talk about in our book Story Selling, there's a concept called transportation, and it's very simple to understand. If you think about when you're reading a good book and you put yourself in the main character's shoes, you've been transported into that character, right? You can see everything from first person, and there's a level of empathy that creates, as well as there's all sorts of brain chemistry that we talk about in the book, not too in depth because we're not brain scientists, but that make you have literally a biological reaction to what's going on. You start feeling certain things. You start getting anxious. You start feeling sad. And so there are elements in stories that are humanizing. And so what we really try to do whenever I tell a story, I try to get to the heart of everything, because at the end of the day, human beings have, I know we're in interesting times, but it's really interesting when you talk about politics and talk about disease. We have the COVID pandemic. Humanity is humanity. This is really, there's nothing new. We've evolved. You give us technology, we find a way to do good things with it. There's a small portion of people find a way to do bad things with it. So I don't really like the narrative like that. We're in a much worse off place than we've ever been. We're in an amazing place. We just have different people, using the tools that we have. And as humanity, we do evolve and do different things. And so every new technology is going to be used, or every new invention, discovery, going to be used for good and bad. That's the double-edged sword, will never go away. So I always just try to get to we have more in common than we have not in common. And so I just try to get to the soul of that. And then, we cover some major plot lines and other things that are devices that people use. But at the end of the day, I would say, I think, actually I learned this question from one of my best friends, my cinematographer for years before he went off and got famous. Now he directs a bunch of reality shows for Amazon and Mark Burnett and stuff. But my friend Rami, who's the second episode of my Larry King show. And, the question is, how did that make you feel? And it's a very simple question, but it's such a humanizing thing because everyone has had feelings. And so when you hear a story about somebody, when you hear a story about someone winning an Olympic gold medal or someone being kidnapped by ISIS, I was just recently filming Iraq, and I interviewed 7 or 8 people who had been kidnapped for years by ISIS warriors. And you can't really comprehend what that would be like. Even when you can sort of think every kid's been in the backyard, hits the ball and runs the bases or whatever, like they just won, the World Series or whatever. But the next question that really takes you into the mind and makes that connection is, and whether you ask it this way or not, but what you're really trying to get is, how'd that make you feel? And so it's all about trying to get human beings to connect. I mean, really, honestly, selfishly, the only reason I really make documentaries is because I was young. We talked a little bit about before we started recording. I'm from Barbados, had a great family, but we didn't know a lot of people. I didn't have mentors in the things I wanted to do in music and then now in film and other things. I want to create a library of work that can inspire, whether it inspires people for 10 years or hundreds of years, like the fact that I made a documentary that has clues about success from Peter Diamandis and Richard Branson, all these people, that a kid or an adult who doesn't have a lot of resources can watch for free basically on Amazon, or even a lot of times we put stuff on YouTube. That's why I do it, because I know I needed that type of content, and books were great for that, but we have many other mediums now, and I choose to use the medium of film because I'm much better filmmaker than writer, I guess. I don't know.
It's interesting because I think I was actually speaking to a friend of mine on a podcast this week, and he was like, Adam, why don't you write another book? Why don't you write another? And I'm like, listen, dude, I'm not there, man. I prefer to do video and audio, right? That's just kind of my medium. Do you know what I'm saying? But yeah, it's interesting that you brought that up. But listen, I know that you work with a lot of big celebrities, business owners, and entrepreneurs alike. But what do you think from experience, Nick? Where do you think they get it wrong in terms of storytelling? Where do you think they get it wrong?
I touched on it earlier, but I'll make it more obvious now. It's that most everyone feels like, number one, that they've lived their story, so they think it's obvious to everybody else. So we just think everyone knows because, I might have told. Look, I've been on, I don't know how many hundreds of podcasts now, and I've told that's, my sort of origin story in different ways. Sometimes I leave out some details, sometimes bring in more, something, whatever. But there's how many millions of people have still never heard that? But I've said it so many times, I feel like the world should know it. So I make the mistake of assuming the world knows it from the time I meet somebody new. The other one is that because I lived it, it wasn't that big of a deal. So, if you are a doctor, most doctors are like, yeah, I'm a doctor. I went to med school. That's what you do. But because that was like the barrier to entry just to get in the door was you had to do that. But the rest of the world is pretty impressed. Like you had to do all these residencies and fellowships and go to school. So we take our own story for granted. And when you look back at your life, there's typically, if we're going to get into I don't like therapy here, what I would say is you basically would start write down 10 or 20 events in your life just that were positive and negative, maybe 10 positive, like highlights, and 10 negatives. And I would say if you were to go through a list like that, the fact that you remember them is a big deal. They are in your subconscious, whether you talk to them regularly or not. I remember as clearly as yesterday, a third grade teacher telling me I was stupid because I couldn't remember math multiplication problems. I remember yesterday. And I've forgiven her now, I think. But I know that part of that drove me to show the world I'm not stupid. I have something to offer, right? So when you go through these experiences, they marked you both positively and negatively, but you can use them all for positive. But everything that you've been through is what led you to the moment you're in and the career you're in and the people you can help. So if you're willing to talk about if you were an alcoholic or you got divorced or you hated school or whatever it is, those are things that will connect you to other people because there'll be people like, man, yes, that is my person. I wasn't sure I could really, I wasn't sure there would ever be a dentist that would understand me, or a brain surgeon, or a business consultant. And it's by connecting those human moments. So I would say that we all write off our own story because we lived it. So we lived it day by day, year by year. It's not a big deal to us. I've worked with so many high performers that, thankfully they aren't drinking their own Kool-Aid to some extent. They're not like, oh, I'm really important. You get some of those people, not many of them, like the Mark Cubans, the Richard Bransons. These people like Lisa Nicklaus, amazing people, but it's just that's just what they do. I would say, I was interviewing Tony Robbins, not to name drop, but I do love Tony. But Tony said, human beings desire progress. We need progress. If you're not moving forward, you feel like you're moving backward. And so when it takes a while to create the type of momentum to be able to do the things on that level, they don't normally just pop up overnight. Every now and then someone might win a lottery or something, but really everything you are leading to is pretty much sequential. But to build the momentum to play on that level, but once you get to that level, it's sort of just another day. Tony Robbins is talking to another world leader every day because that's what he's been working up to for the last 50 years of his life. And so we often write that off, and we often think that we can never get to that level. But we can. We just have to understand, you have to really want to, and that's to be a reason you can say, I want to be famous, or I don't subscribe to that. But if there's a reason that you can serve other people at that level, you get started, there is a path to that. But so long-winded answer, but I think people write off their own stories because they lived them.
Yeah, it's a good point, actually. But there was actually something else that came to my mind when you were actually speaking, because I feel that, I get, especially from a lot of conversations that I have with a lot of sort of really big brands and personal brands, is that there's this kind of, I suppose, fear factor in terms of vulnerability. If they share their story, right, and they're going to expose themselves or whatever it is. Have you ever come across that?
I guess so. I mean, a lot of people are reluctant, and it's most people do have an idea of the way they want to be seen. So they often, often you have to be careful the way people will connect dots sometimes differently than you will.
Right.
So there's a hesitance in a lot of cases of people to come out and share things. I mean, I've dealt with it the most in cases of I interviewed this woman on this film we're doing on human trafficking in the Middle East. And, the woman was bought and sold by ISIS soldiers for 6 years. And, her community, she comes from a particular small religious sect. And many times if a woman has been, sexually abused, they're no longer fit for anything. Like they're sort of useless. And so she stepped up and said, no, I'm going to share my story because I want other women around the world to understand that there are other people who have been abused like you, and it doesn't mean that's the end of your life. It can be, you can find a new beginning, and not to put words in her mouth, but that's essentially the message I got from her. And she's an amazingly talented woman. And so she wrote a book. She's traveled the world. She got like a Mother Teresa award. But so when I see someone like that willing to share their story, those are the hardest ones because obviously it's super. I mean, what are people going to think? But I think when you share your story and you're authentic about it, I guess people will always take pot shots. I have a friend who says it well. The higher that you climb the flagpole, the more your ass is going to hang out. So, and so you're going to have to deal with some of that, but. It's so rare. It's really funny. I mean, I always wonder, where's someone going to take a pot shot at me for whatever reason? Because there's people who are angry, right? There's people going through things in their lives, whether it's jealousy or they've been abused, or there are genuinely a lot. I mean, most of them live on Twitter. There's a lot of people out there who are just mad at the world. I just did an episode again with my show. In case you didn't know, that's on Amazon Prime, the one Larry King produces. Larry was the first episode. I said my friend Rami was the second episode. Lisa Nicklaus, who's incredible from The Secret and amazing speakers, number 3. Number 4 is Anthony Scaramucci, and anybody who knows anything about politics, which I don't cover really, he was the White House communications director for 11 days and then got very unceremoniously fired in the news. It's very embarrassing, whatever. And I interviewed him, and he had a lot of great things to say about that because really he went to Harvard Law School. He was running a hedge fund, a very bright guy on a very upward trajectory, and then his life got blown up by the media after 11 days of this big post in the White House, and sort of a big embarrassment, and a bunch of people. You find out who your real friends are first of all, but it really he sort of said, when that happened to me, he said, I made a mistake, I deserve to be fired, but there are people who are just angry at the world. There's nothing I can do for them, but I realized after a few days, after a few weeks, and I got back to work just doing what I was doing before. And if that's the worst thing that ever happened, he's like, it's really not that bad. I mean, it's everyone would be afraid of being ridiculed on the front page of every newspaper in the world, basically. But this too shall pass. It goes away, right? And so when I interviewed Anthony, I put something up on Twitter, and oh my gosh, I got just vitriol, just the rudest. I'm like, man, you should meet the guy. He's a really decent guy. And so, you can't worry too much about it. I think it's a process for everybody. I would say share what you're comfortable sharing. Don't share what you're not comfortable sharing. But I will tell you, as someone who's told many a story with many person around the globe, the more willing to share it, all the good, the bad, and the ugly you are with the world, you will become addicted to the level of connection and depth it creates with other people because they can see instantly who you are and connect with you because you've opened up sort of your deepest parts to them, and most people are very respectful of that and just will be able to connect with you better.
Love that, because it's kind of and I really dislike people scratching at the surface level. I love that kind of deep connection. Do you know what I'm saying? When you work with, because I know that you work with you mentioned Tony Robbins, you mentioned Sir Richard Branson and stuff. Is there a process that you work with when you work with some big celebrities? Is there a process that you work with in order to create a story or whatever it is, whether it be for a big event, whether it be a speaking event or a documentary or whatever it is? Is there a process that you follow?
There is. I've developed it over messing up a lot. Thankfully, you can't tell in the end. But we really, the way we start now is I have an idea of the story I want to tell. I have a very talented story producer and writer I've used multiple over the years, but that will write the outlines for me, and I sort of tell them, here's what I think I want to get, but do some more research, find things I don't know. We'll typically try to do a pre-interview with the celebrity or whoever if we can, and try to learn some things that are unique or that other people haven't talked about. And then really, my story producer creates an outline for me that is, I often use the analogy of a baby. And so this outline is like an ultrasound. Like there's a baby and you have an idea it's probably going to be a little bit like, I don't know, me and my wife, like we would imagine. But until it comes out, that's a different game. And so I always tell people this outline, there's a lot of work been put here, but it really is just so I don't forget any really important people, places, or things or ideas. But compared to the final film, and I also have to apologize to my story producer, I'm like, this is boring compared to what we're going to end up with, because all we know is what we know. But the magic moments happen when, if you see my Larry King series, he says, let me tell you, I'll tell you something I've never revealed before on camera. Like, all right. And so you start getting these human moments. And what I learned along the way was I used to have my outline and I would try to stick to the outline because this is the story I'm going to tell. But I then realized very quickly that when someone's eyes light up and they start taking you down a rabbit trail, that's usually the story you want. It's a story that they're excited about. And, there's nothing worse than hearing or watching someone tell a story that's not excited about it at all. That's like the kiss of death. So go with where they're excited. And so I have the outline. I do the interviews, and of course I turn it over to my editor. I give him the outline. I said, "Here's all the footage we've got. Here's the outline." And I let him do his thing. I found that building a team of people that are better than you is amazing. There's a book that I read during the pandemic, which is a really good book. I've known his wife, but I hadn't read his book, and I've become friends with him. But the book is called The Bezos Letters by Steve Anderson, written with his wife, Karen Anderson. And there's a concept in there that I'll break down not nearly as eloquently, but he says essentially, Jeff Bezos, one of his principles is essentially never hire someone you don't admire. And that could be anything down to a house cleaner. Like, you should admire how much they love to clean and make sure everything's in order, or an assistant, or so many people look down on people with a job that pays less, which I mean, it's a common thing in society, but when you shift your mindset from that and you just say, no, I just want the best. I want someone who's way better at that than I am. And I want to admire how good they are. And when you really you don't admire somebody who does a half-assed job. You just don't. You admire people who really take care in what they do, and they're 1 or 2 or 3 steps ahead of you. Or, man, I never would have thought to do it that way. And so my whole entire team and my crew is that way. I just admire that. Like, I could not write that outline. I could not edit that film that way. And I think the good news is they don't have the relationships that I do. They couldn't do the interview the way I do it. So we all just work together with our own talents, and you end up with something that's far greater than the sum of all of our parts. It becomes a whole new baby. It's a whole new life. And it's fun to see where they go.
I love it. Very good. Just out of curiosity, because a lot of our listeners are, I suppose, entrepreneurs and business owners and CEOs of multinational companies, how can we adapt our storytelling or whatever it is that we want to get out to the world into our own business?
I mean, there's so many different media formats now. I think so. We talked about branding being storytelling, and the best story wins. And what most of us don't do is effectively share a story. And with the opportunities we have now, I really feel like the world has shifted to real-time storytelling. And so we have many mediums at our fingertips, from podcasts to, group Zooms to like I'm doing a live stream later today on Facebook that will become one of my podcasts. Like we have Instagram, we have YouTube, we have all these things we could be doing and using in order to share our story. And I would say don't get overwhelmed by all of them. Find something you like to do. So I've spent an awful lot of time working with Dan Sullivan from Strategic Coach. Dan has a concept called unique ability, and the real concept is everyone is born with a unique ability, and your job as an entrepreneur is to uncover what that is, because right now you're doing way too many things that are outside of your unique ability that are they're just sucking your energy. And so you really need to be finding what is it that is my unique ability, and then build a team around unique ability teamwork, having other people filling in the gaps because that's their unique ability, not yours. And my unique ability is having impactful conversations that lead to produced outcomes. Now, we could break that down for a while. It took me like 10 years and lots of money to figure that out. But, having, impactful conversations that lead to produced outcomes. So that's all I do. So you asked me to be on a podcast, no problem. You asked me to write an article for your magazine, nope. Unless you give me a writer to work with, I can have an impactful conversation with them, and they'll produce the outcome that I want, which is going to be an article. So I have a team that does so. Okay, just as part of real-time storytelling. The way that I choose to do it is through interviews. So because I love sharing other people's knowledge with the world, and hopefully I have a unique insight on it. So like today, I'm doing an interview. I had my story producer read the book, watch a lot of other interviews, do other things, and give me an outline. And essentially the way I like doing it, I tell her, this is my process. I say, write an article about the subject as if they were the cover story on a major magazine. And so she puts all sorts of stuff together, tries to find new stuff, tries to reads the books, does all that, and gives me a story. And so I have the interview it is at 3 p.m. Eastern time today, so it's 12:30 now.
Right.
So I got my outline here. I'm going to my story. I haven't read it yet. I will read it about 30 minutes before and make notes on it and just mark it up so it's super fresh in my head. And then I'll do that interview. I used to follow these outlines an awful lot, or these stories, and just go piece by piece. Now I've realized that the best conversation, I'm a songwriter. I write a lot of country music. I go to Nashville and I have a publishing deal there. And the saying up there is we should write, what song are we going to write today? And most people are like, well, how do you know what to write? And the common response is, well, we just write the best song in the room. We just write the song that's in the room that day. And so to me, I sort of take that over to podcasting and say, I want to have the conversation that's in the room that day. So this is historical information. There's also real-time information. So let's cover the real-time. Now that I'm well informed about your history, and we can talk about it, we can dig into whenever we want, but let's just have the conversation that's being had. So I will have that conversation. Then it goes to my team. My team will edit it, so it stays up on Facebook, because it was done live. So we get 15, 20, 25 people. I'm building it, but it's not a lot of people tune in live. But I like it better than doing it in a vacuum. I much prefer to have a little bit of audience, or someone will be laughing or make a joke or whatever, and I can, we can banter a little bit. So then that's on Facebook. Then my team takes it and they edit all the audio and add the bumpers and everything to put up on iTunes and Spotify and Stitcher and all that. They take the video and add those bumpers and put them up on YouTube at that. Then I have a team that takes the video and creates 4 to 7 what we call snackable clips, like video clips with text and headers and stuff, and start scheduling those out on Facebook, Instagram, all that stuff. And then I have another team that listens to it and writes a blog post of the best lessons you could learn from it. Mm-hmm. So I end up with audio, video, snackable video clips, stuff on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and a blog, and multiple, shareable posts from doing one thing, from staying within my unique ability. It's all I have to do is stay in my lane, and everything else I have a team that'll do. And by the way, during the pandemic, we started realizing I didn't start my podcast. I had a couple false starts, I'll say, before that, but it was the only thing I could really do during the pandemic to try to help serve other people. Was like, well, I got a pretty unique network. I could talk to some of them. And so, we're now, it's whatever. It's September of 2020. I started my podcast in April, I guess. I think I have 15 episodes up right now. And we started realizing that I had a team of creative and technical professionals that could do anything from design a logo or write a blog post to produce a feature film, and they were all doing nothing. Like they had nothing. We had nothing. We couldn't go on shoots, couldn't do anything. So I created a network called the Success Network, where now we have clients who have us do all these things for them. They just have to show up. Our team records and produces the podcast. We'll do the show notes. We'll do the blog posts. We'll do the snackable videos if you want. So we do that for our clients because we built such a good system for doing it. But it all comes back to just me staying in my lane and operating inside my unique ability, which doesn't, like, if I had to do the blog posts or the outlines or the social posts or it just would drain my energy. And so I don't do it. So I built a team around me that I admire how good they are at what they do. And so they handle the rest. So they do their job, I do mine. And it's an amazing thing how much gets done.
You know, I love that because this is where I think we are very similar in our own ways, because what you've just said there is essentially you've taken one piece of content, whether it be a podcast interview, whatever it might be, and recycle it into different mediums. You have a marketing team. I also have a marketing team. But guys, listen, I know it can be extremely overwhelming, right? With all these social media platforms, be able to build brand awareness, right? Which is crazy, where you can have a developer team like Nick has done or what I've done and do exactly the same. Listen, Nick, I know that I'm respectful of your time. I know that you're working with Larry King, the amazing Larry King, on a series called In Case You Don't Know. Is that correct?
In case you didn't know, yes.
Yeah. And you're featuring people like Seth Godin, Sir Richard Branson, Lisa Nicklaus, who you mentioned, and whatever it is, and that kind of stuff. Tell us more about that, and when does it come out? And tell us more about that.
Yeah, so the series right now is on Amazon Prime. There are 5 episodes out right now. We've got Larry King, who said Rami Romani. We've got Lisa Nicklaus. I have Anthony Scaramucci, and then Dr. Nito Cobain, who's an amazing, amazing guy as well. Yeah, he's so good. And then we're finishing up the 6th episode right now. We'll go live most likely in the next month. Is Robert Kiyosaki, the author of Rich Dad Poor Dad. And then I have in the hopper, I haven't even gotten to editing yet. We have Anusha Ansari, the first female private space explorer. We have Glenn Beck. I have Tim Ballard from Operation Underground Railroad. I've got Dean Kamen, the inventor of the Segway. So we have a lot coming. And then we do just have a film that we did a brief online launch. It'll be in global distribution January 2021, called Dreamer. Dreamer is all about the people who the world told them to get their head out of the clouds. They didn't listen and they changed the world. And in that film, we have Sir Richard Branson, Seth Godin. We also have Lisa Nicklaus and Dean Kamen. In that one, we have Peter Diamandis, the founder of the X Prize, Jessica Cox, the first pilot in the world with no arms, and so it's an amazing, amazing story of what happens when your dream is bigger than your audience's negativity and whoever that is, and so. Yeah, that's fun. But yeah, I would love, the biggest favor anyone could do for me right now, so I'll ask, is to go to Amazon, watch In Case You Didn't Know, and leave me some reviews. Getting Amazon reviews, even when we have thousands of people watch, I can't blame them because I don't review anything on Amazon unless someone really asks me to. So please give us some reviews. I think you'll enjoy the show. It's a pretty different format than anyone else is doing. I call it a docu-interview series because it's an interview series, but it sort of disappears into documentary pieces about the person as they narrate their own life story.
Cool. Listen, guys, do me a favor. Do what Nick has just said, right? Go to Amazon Prime. Make sure that you listen to the documentary, watch the documentary, and leave Nick a review, because what we want to do is we want to help Nick get the documentary out to as many people as possible, but we need your help to do so, right, Nick?
Yes, thank you. I'd appreciate that.
Listen, Nick, I just want to say thank you so much for being on the show today. I've thoroughly enjoyed our conversations. And guys, listen, I hope that you have also picked up some insightful tips around storytelling, a little bit about personal branding and so forth. So Nick, just want to say thank you so much for being on the show today, buddy.
Likewise, man. Thanks for having me on.
Really appreciate it. Guys, listen, have a good one. We'll see you soon on the next Game Changers Experience. Take care.
Hey, you guys, I just want to say thank you so much for listening in to this episode of the Game Changers Experience. I hope that you got some amazing value, some great insights, and golden nuggets that you can implement into your business straight away. I would really, really appreciate it if you could leave a 5-star review on the button below. Have a fantastic day, and we'll see you on the next episode. Take care.